Hi, I'm Dr. Donna Lane.
And I'm Dr. David Lane.
We're going to talk today about the reason for misbehavior in children. Why do children misbehave? We want to talk first about what motivates a child to misbehave. Why does that happen? And fundamentally, there are four basic goals that result in a child deciding to misbehave or choosing to misbehave. So we'd like to go over those four goals first. And then once we go over those goals, we want to talk about, okay, so now that we know why they do it, how do you intervene? What do you do to help your child make better choices? And what kinds of responses work the best? So I'm going to talk about the first goal. The first goal is pretty obvious, and that goal is attention. Kids often will act out in order to get attention. For a child, any attention is better than no attention, even if it's negative attention. And so they would rather you give them attention by being jumping in to correct their behavior or being negative toward them than to not communicate or interact with them at all. So, something that you might see for attention-seeking behavior, is one that is very common, is somebody calls mom on the phone, and she's clearly talking on the phone. And as soon as the child's playing in the floor, happy as a clam, but as soon as she gets on the phone, child's at her legs going, "Mama, mama, 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 mama." And what's the natural first response of the mom is to turn and look at the child and say, "I'm on the phone." But keep in mind that that's actually giving attention to the misbehavior. And if the goal of the child is to get attention, then you've just reinforced their goal. So that's the first goal of misbehavior. So, David, you want to do the second one?
Yeah, it's important to remember too that most misbehavior is just a maladaptive attempt to get a legitimate need met. So in the case of attention, everybody likes attention. I mean, now that you are at age of majority, you still like to have the attention of your friends or husband, wife, significant other, etc. You like to have that attention, and because it feels good, it feels like they validate you and appreciate you, etc. So if a child is seeking negative attention, it's a legitimate need that they receive attention. And we don't want to discourage people from giving attention. We're going to talk about how to best deal with this stuff after we talk about the four goals. But I did want to point out that it's maladaptive attempts to meet a legitimate need. It's not something wrong or something illegitimate or something damaged that the person is trying to seek attention. The second goal is power and control. And this again is legitimate. Everybody wants to feel power in their lives. They want to feel like they have authority over their life, their behavior, and they want to be recognized in that power. And a child seeking power will set up power struggles. They will be defiant. You've heard of the terrible twos. Well, got just a tad of bad news. In that terrible twos are artificial. They're parent created. Now, don't throw stones. I'm glad you can't throw stones through the computer because nobody wants to hear that. I did not make my child. Well, yeah, because it's a legitimate need for the 2-year-old child to seek authority. They're in a developmental stage that calls for them to create autonomy, to realize that they govern themselves and they are seeking power in the only way that they know how, which is to say no, because they've heard that 9 million times in the first 2 years of their lives. And so now that they realize that they're a separate individual, they begin to say no themselves. And if I, as the adult in the room, decide to fight with them about it, well, they won. The bad news is they already won. They have power over the situation. But it's a legitimate need for somebody to desire to have power over their own life and to be able to have choices in their life and to feel like they have the authority in their life. And the third goal.
All right. The third goal is a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. The term that's used to describe it is display of inadequacy. But the best way for me to explain it is to say that it's an attempt to avoid responsibility. So an example of that would be a child who takes every toy that he owns out of the play box and spreads them all over the floor. And he is quite capable of doing that. They can get all those toys out. But as soon as mom says, time to put the toys up, all of a sudden the child has no bones in his body and he flops on the floor. I can't. And that's the display of inadequacy. Now, it doesn't mean that he's not capable of doing it. He is definitely capable. If he can get them out, he can put them back. But he is demonstrating inadequacy or displaying inadequacy in order to avoid taking responsibility for picking up those toys or correcting the mess that he's made, if you want to call it a mess, taking responsibility for things that belong to him. Like attention and power and control. If you think about the adults that you know in your life and yourself included, it's very hard to take responsibility sometimes. And it feels a whole lot better to say, I can't, or to give the responsibility to someone else. And so you can kind of understand the reason for that goal. The child doesn't want to do the hard thing. They're trying to not have to do the hard thing. And they're also trying not to feel inadequate. They display inadequacy in order to not feel inadequate to a task. If they're afraid they're not going to be able to do it, they then want to avoid feeling that feeling. So that's the third one.
And husbands do that sometimes too. And I'm not giving up any of my trade secrets. Don already knows them for a long time. I didn't know how to wash a load of clothes. So I didn't know how to separate the colors from the white. I didn't know how to turn on the machine. I didn't know where the laundry detergent was until ultimately she would say, fine, whatever, I will just do it. But she figured out my goal was to avoid responsibility, and she nipped that in the bud. So I'm not giving away any secrets. I may have given a spoiler to some of the wives out there who may be listening to this. And so husbands, I apologize up front for that, exposing your display of inadequacy as avoidance of responsibility. And I hate that for you, but I had my comeuppance, and by grannies, you need yours too. But anyway, the fourth goal is one that is a little more disturbing, and that's revenge. And revenge is when something happens to a child, they get their feelings hurt. Somebody does something wrong. Frequently, it's a sibling, but it could be anybody in the world. Something happens, and they plot and plan a way to get that person back or to hurt them, and that begins to move over toward dysfunction, because anytime that I try to hurt another human being, that needs to be intervened with, and needs to be intervened with pretty quickly, because it can lead to very, very destructive kind of things. There's lots of ways that people seek revenge. They can be very behind the back aggressive, in that they talk bad about somebody else, or they do something. Older siblings sometimes will get mad at younger siblings and break their toys or hide their toys or their favorite toy they'll do something with. And that's a way that you can recognize revenge for what it is. But there's also the passive aggressive version of revenge, where you act as if nothing is wrong, and you very passively then set the other person up for some kind of unpleasant consequence. So that one needs to be dealt with pretty directly, and that's how you deal with it. You deal with it by being direct, by calling it out, and focusing on it, because it's all supposed to remain in the shadows and under the table and hidden. And if you call it out into the light of day, then you foil that goal of revenge. So those are the four basic goals. There is a fifth one for adolescence. Adolescence, you add the fifth one of thrill seeking. As teenagers, a lot of kids start doing stuff, that borders on dangerous, and boys get their driver's license at 16, and you're really arming them with a lethal weapon. So you have to have knowledge that they're going to be able to make good decisions, and they're going to have to behave appropriately, or other issues like that, where they have to be responsible for what they're doing. Because when you get behind the wheel of a car, things get really, really dangerous really, really quickly. So watch teenagers for thrill seeking. So there's 4 basic goals for children. Then you add the 5th one for an adolescent of thrill seeking. But how do you know which goal it is? Okay, you've identified that that the child is misbehaving. How do you identify what the goal is? Attention seeking, of course, they want, you feel like that you need to give them some attention, or the feeling that goes with that is you're very frustrated. They're driving you crazy. I remember my daddy saying to me 1,000 times, David, you could worry the horns off a billy goat. And what he was describing in our rural Alabama country kind of life was that I did a lot of irritating things to be the center of attention and to get the attention that I wanted or was craving. And so he felt irritated. So when you feel irritated, you know that the child is seeking attention. When you begin to feel frustrated with them because you're on the phone, like Donna said, and they're mama, 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 I'm on the phone. You're frustrated with them. That's the feeling that goes with it. Power and control, the second goal, you feel like you want to fight. I will show that little sucker who's in charge. That means they're seeking power because it stirs up the urge for power in you. The third one, display of inadequacy, you want to just throw up whatever. If you'll just stop, I will pick up the toys. If you'll just quit. So you feel frustrated, but it's a different frustrated than the attention seeking. It's frustrated in that I quit. I'm out of energy. You have worn me down. And that's how you feel when it's a display of inadequacy. And revenge, you feel like righteous indignation. It's different from the power struggle, the wanting to fight that you would feel from a power and control misbehavior. It's a righteous indignation. How dare you? How dare they? And so that's the feeling that's stirred up with it. And thrill seeking, you feel frightened. And so the way that you identify what the goal of the misbehavior is by how you feel. I feel frustrated. Oh, that must mean the child is seeking attention. I feel hurt, and how dare they? That means this child is being vengeful and seeking revenge. And so that's how you identify it, is by how you feel as a result of their misbehavior. Once you've identified what their goal is, then the secret becomes, how do I thwart that? Because again, they are perfectly legitimate needs. Children need attention. So it becomes an issue of, how do I give the child attention without it being negative attention? How do I flip it on them and give them positive attention?
All right, so let's look at how you would respond to attention-seeking behavior once you identify that the goal is attention. You know that giving them attention at that point is just going to reinforce the goal. Any attention is going to reinforce the goal. So they come up to you and they say, mama, 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 and you turn away from them and continue talking on the phone. Or walk in the other room if they are so loud that it's disruptive to your phone call. But you don't turn and look at them. You don't yell at them. You don't tell them to be quiet. You just walk in the other room. When they display the behavior you want them to display, meaning that they are not demanding your attention anymore, or they're not screaming while you're on the phone, then you lavish them with attention and you make it overt. This is how you get my attention. These are the things you do that I then want to spend time with you. I love to spend time with you. Look at how wonderful this feels when we can be together in this positive way. And so you make sure that you meet the need, but you meet the need when they're displaying the behavior that's desirable. And in that process, you're reinforcing the desirable behavior and you're teaching them what your expectations are for how they are to behave, because you're reinforcing the right thing.
You catch them being good. In other words, it's easy to catch them being bad. Donna still catches me being bad. And so it's easy to catch somebody being bad, but you catch them being good. They're doing what's not. They're being nice to their sibling. They're sitting still on the couch reading. They are interacting with you wonderfully and appropriately, and not begging or being annoying or bugging you or distracting you or anything like that. Interrupting. And when you catch them being good, then you fawn on them and give them good attention.
Real good positive attention. and in particular, the kind of attention that they are really seeking. Like if they were pulling on your leg wanting you to read a book, you don't give them that attention and you don't read the book until you see them displaying the appropriate behavior, which would look like coming up and asking you when you are not busy, asking you nicely. At that point, I want to read that book. Let's sit down right now and read that book. And you lavish that on them at the time, reinforcing that behavior that you desire to see. So power and control. Power and control is easy to identify in that you know the feeling when you want to make sure you put them in their place or make sure you show them who's in charge, that kind of thing. It's easy to identify. It's harder for you to manage your own response. And it is important for you to manage your own response because your instinctive response is to tell you to slam down the control. That's very defeating because that reinforces their goal. They have made you, and this is in their mind now, they have made you angry. They have gotten a reaction out of you that gives them the power in their minds. And so that reinforces, I know how to get mama. I know how to upset daddy. I've got it figured out. And they'll do it over and over and over again. So instead, the antidote or prescription for control is choice. So you present them choices. Now, in a choice, you can give them as many choices or as few, as long as it's more than two. Give them two choices or more. That gives them a sense of having authority because they are getting to choose between those two choices. Now, the wonderful side effect of that is that you're teaching them how to make good choices at the same time that you're defeating the control desire. If that makes sense, you're at the same time showing them, well, you could either do this or do this. These are both good choices. Which choice do you want to make? Or you've got the choice of this, or this. Any of those choices are fine. Which choice do you want to make? And then they get to choose from those choices. And that gives them that sense of authority instead of control. And what they really want when they're exerting that power and control misbehavior is they want to feel like they have autonomy, like David said, authority over their own lives. And so you give them that authority.
And since that's a secret to life, successful adults are good decision makers.
Right.
And since that's one of the keys to life and one of the secrets to life, the earlier you start it with your choices, the better off you're going to be. When a child is 8 months old and they're just getting verbal, ask them, well, do you want to wear the blue shirt or the red shirt? Do you want the green peas or the green beans? Now you are setting the parameters, so you're in charge of the child because the child's going to be clothed when he or she goes out of the house. They're going to have a green vegetable for supper, but they get to choose. And so in those little things, they're already choosing. They're realizing they have power, so that when they get to be 16 years old and you arm them with a lethal weapon, i.e., the keys to the automobile, then they know how to make decent decisions because they've been making choices as long as they've been around.
Mm-hmm. And when they make good choices, when they choose something that works well for them, you want to make sure that, of course, it's intrinsically rewarding because we all feel good when we make a good choice and it goes well for me. But on top of that, you want to make sure that you say, that was really a great choice. I'm really impressed how you made that decision, or I'm encouraged that you really thought that through. So you reinforce for them their good choice making.
And process the good and the bad choices. They make a bad choice. You say, oh, that didn't look like that turned out too well.
What were the consequences?
What happened when you did that? What could you do differently next time?
Right.
Then in the good choices, you say, that seemed like it went really, really well. Taught me through how you arrived at that decision. And next time, you can maybe make a good choice like that again. That's a really, really good idea. Mm-hmm. So that they learn how to make good choices, and it moves the authority and power from in their lives from outside them, because every child has an external what's called external locus of control. The power's outside of them. The power's in the parents, in the teacher, in the social adults around them that they are surrounded by, extended family, social, etc. to once they begin to make decisions and good decisions and understand how to make good decisions, then the locus of the control, the locus power location, the power is internal. And that's extraordinarily important because an internal locus control is a healthy lifestyle. External locus control, believing that somebody else or something else controls me, controls my life, is extraordinarily unhealthy. Prisons and mental institutions are full of people with external locus of control. So the more quickly that you can help a child learn to be a good decision maker and feel empowered in their own life, then the better off they're going to be long term.
Mm-hmm. We started giving our children choices as soon as they got any language at all. Even just, pointing to the yellow shirt, we would say green shirt, yellow shirt, and hold up the choices so that they always felt like in their conscious memory, they have always felt like they had choice. And then by the time they were 9 years old, they were really well equipped to make choices on their own. And they would come to us with a problem. We say, what are your options? What are your choices? And they would list the choices. And we say, which choice do you want to choose? And they would choose. And we'd say, sounds good. And that made our job a whole lot easier. But the hard work is done up front.
Right.
The investment in creating those choice opportunities over and over again, constantly giving them choices. It requires attention. It's very time consuming, but invest early, long-term gain. It works really well in the long term. So I really encourage you to practice teaching them choice thinking. Choice thinking is much healthier.
Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with display of inadequacy? Really simple. You don't let them off the hook. You say to them, now you can do this. And so I expect you to do it. So you can stop with the complaining about having to do it. Then the other thing you do is when you catch them being good, you set them up to do little tiny steps of success. Would you mind helping me load the dishwasher? And that teaches them that we're cooperative, we work together. And when they're in there with the kitchen, in there with you in the kitchen, you're saying them, you're giving them guidance. Here, would you put the cup on the top rack over in the corner? Great, that's wonderful. Thank you. This plate, better if you stand it up on its edge in the bottom. And you're giving them direction, but you're saying, good job. You did really well. I like the way you did that. Your attention. I really like it when you're helping me. This works so much better to get along and work together, and it's really, really fine to see us accomplish things together like this. So you give them positive attention. You're letting them make choices about that, and you're teaching them that they can do whatever they set their minds to do.
Yeah, your language that you use for intervening in display of inadequacy matters. If you use encouraging language, like I have confidence in you, I believe in your ability to do that, I know you're capable of that, I have seen you do it before, or I know you're capable because I've seen you do similar things before, I'm sure you can handle it. And then walk away. Just, you do it. Let me know when you're finished. But that encouraging language is very helpful and positive. A lot of times parents try to use reward, like if you will clean up, then I will give you something. I will give you a treat or something like that. That's a very external kind of reinforcer, which is not teaching the thing you want to teach.
And it's not, because that's not how life works.
Right. You're supposed to clean up your mess. So that's an intrinsic reward. You don't need to give them a treat for doing it. That's basically bribery. On top of that, you don't want to teach your kids to have an external motivator. You want to teach them to be intrinsically or internally motivated, where they do it because they desire to do it. And so in the scenario that David was mentioning, where you're asking them to help you do the dishes and they're getting lots of positive attention from the parent, they're getting undivided attention from the parent is giving them all sorts of encouraging statements and how great they're doing and how much they appreciate the help and how wonderful it is, then the child all of a sudden starts getting that intrinsic reward of working cooperatively works better. So then you don't have to give your kids some kind of an external reward. we really recommend against that across the board. The rewards and accomplishments need to be internally driven and not externally driven. And just your encouragement and affirmation is reward. That's pretty much what they want anyway. They want you to love them, and they want to know you love them. And so giving them those kinds of more intangible and therefore able to internalize and make intrinsic reinforcements are much more effective.
And the last one is revenge. How do you deal with revenge? I mentioned earlier when I was talking about it that you bring it into the light of day because it's very unattractive. It's not a desirable kind of behavior. So you sit everybody down who's affected and you just bring it out in the light of the day. And David, I saw you do this thing. What were you trying to do? Well, it looked to me like you were trying to hurt Donna when you were doing that. Talk to me about how you were feeling, and was that your intent to hurt her? What's another way that you could have done that instead of trying to do something to get her back? What if you said to Donna, it really hurt my feelings when you did that thing, whatever it was you did. It really hurt me, or I didn't like that you did the thing and I'd really like you to stop. What if you did that instead of try to hurt her? Because it's absolutely not appropriate to seek to hurt another human being in any context. That's not appropriate. That's not a way to deal with problems and resolve issues.
It's a really good idea in this. Well, it's always a good idea, but in the revenge scenario, the golden rule is a good application here, because you can always ask the child, if someone did that to you, how would you feel? You're asking them to put themselves in the other person's shoes. And then you set the desired expectation is that they would treat other people like they want to be treated, that they would, knowing that that would hurt their sister, they would choose not to hurt their sister. And at the same time, you're giving them an alternative way to handle it. I'm giving you words, because a lot of times kids don't have the words they need, and they just react instead of stopping and putting language to it. So helping them develop and giving them those words is very helpful to them. So giving them words to say, to express their hurt feelings or their frustration that their little sister came in their room and it's my room. And well, how can you express that and tell your little sister how that felt and help them go through that process while you coach them, basically, and help them work on that.
Then the fifth one that you add on with teenagers to thrill seeking is you talk with them and you talk about your feelings. It's scary for me to think about that you were out there doing this thing, driving the car in an irresponsible manner, to continue the analogy that I've been using the whole video here. And you talk to him. It's really, really scary. Walk with me through all the things that could happen if you're being irresponsible, making poor decisions while you're driving a car. And you help them look at and process it with you. And I know there's no guarantee of safety. You say that too. I know, driving an automobile is dangerous anyway. And I know there's absolutely no guarantee. But what I do want is a faith in the fact that you're going to behave respectfully and responsibly out in the world when nobody's looking, because that's what defines us, is how we behave when nobody's watching us. And I want you to be successful. I want you to be safe. And I don't want to have to worry when you walk out the door. And that's how you handle it. So you notice how all of the interventions with misbehavior involve talking with your child and processing things. And a real funny thing happens all the way back to you ask them to make a decision between the yellow shirt and the green shirt, between the green peas and the green beans. You're asking them to make those decisions, and you talk about those things even when they're just, they got a 6-word vocabulary. You're starting to talk with them. And as you're talking to them, they begin to talk to you. so that when they are teenagers, we were just floored a time or two when we developed these habits with them real young to talk and process decisions and figure out all the variables that go into it, and how to think through all the steps, etc. And we were just floored a couple of times with our kids. Can we talk for a minute? And they would bring up some incredibly, the oldest, when he first started dating, he literally asked us to talk one afternoon, and he said, "I know that y'all are going to be worried about sexual behavior, and I wanted to reassure you that I know that that's not a responsible thing to do." And Don and I mean, we controlled our nonverbals, but on the inside, we were going. We were just floored because the door had been open for 16 years, or I don't know how old he was exactly. I think he was in ninth grade, so maybe 15. And the door had been open for so long, it was just a natural thing to talk about. I mean, we weren't talking about, the sex act or anything like that. We were just talking about a normal piece of the teenage development. They get interested in opposite sex, and one thing leads to another, which leads to another, if they don't know how to make decisions. And a lot of negative things can come out of that. So when you open the door to communication, which is how we urge you to solve every one of the problems of misbehavior, the goals of misbehavior, it leads to really long-term positive potentials. No guarantees, of course, but it leads to really good potential outcomes as you go down the road. Things that you want to happen begin to happen. The hardest part, however, is dealing with me. I've got to start by identify the goals by my own feelings. So I've got to take a minute and go, how's that? Instead of reacting and, how am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling really angry. I'm wanting to fight. Okay, so he's seeking power. How can I step out of the power struggle and in another situation, give her power in an appropriate way? Exactly, by giving choice. And so instead of fighting, I give choice, and I seek opportunities to put them in a role of responsibility. Would you mind helping me get the groceries out of the car? Now, that doesn't sound like putting them in a place of responsibility, but it is. You're asking them, one, to help, which is a really, really valuable attribute in life. If you are a helpful person, you give good out, you get good back. And if I teach them to help other people, then that's extremely valuable down the road. And it puts her in a responsible position of, not dropping the eggs, being careful of the glass jars of jam and olives and whatever's in the glass jars, pickles, as you're bringing them into the house. So she has to be responsible and behave responsibly in order to do those kind of things. Would you mind helping your little brother get his clothes out for today? She's in charge of her little brother. And so then she feels good because she's in charge. She, i.e., has power, and she doesn't have to struggle for power. And the more of those opportunities you can create, the better off you're going to be. But talking through is the best thing you can do. But that starts with how I feel and managing my feelings and managing what I want to do. And you don't have to be perfect. Nobody is perfect. What you want to do is, most of the time, I act instead of react, because if I react, it's an emotional response, which is generally negative. I'm giving them negative attention. I'm fighting with them. I'm screaming at them for seeking revenge, and those are typically negative kind of things. But if I can be reasoned in the vast majority of my responses, then I'm going to be teaching much better lessons than reacting. If I can react, and that starts with managing me, which is really, really hard.
It takes a lot of practice and intentionality to pay attention to what it is I'm feeling and listen to those feelings first before I respond, and don't react, like David said. So we're going to give you a freebie now. This is not about parenting, but it's a little trick of the trade. The goals of misbehavior for children end up being the goals of misbehavior for adults too. So if you are finding that you and your spouse are getting in a lot of conflicts about stuff and button heads and things like that, start paying attention to how you're feeling and see if you can identify the goal And then instead of reacting to the behavior and getting frustrated with the behavior, sit down and talk with your spouse about the goal. So, as an example, let's say that I all of a sudden am acting really needy and, oh, can you get that for me? I'm so tired. I just need you to take care of this and that. Okay, so what's my goal there? And I'm sending him to wait on me. I'm sending him to do for me. Um, that's me displaying inadequacy and avoiding responsibility. So I want something out of that. I'm trying to get something out of that. So he can sit down with me and have a conversation about what's going on. How are you feeling? What's behind that? I want to try to meet the need without reinforcing the goal, and really see if that gives you some better and more useful way to understand other people's behaviors, because the goals don't change.
Right.
All right. Well, we hope that this has been helpful. And
remember, attention, power, display of inadequacy, and revenge. These are not unique to us. Rudolf Dreikurs is the person who came up with the 4 goals of misbehavior back in the 40s. He was a protege of Alfred Adler, who was a German Austrian psychiatrist, 1890s up. He died in 1938. But Rudolf Dreikurs was one of his students, and he developed these goals of misbehavior. So attention, power, display of inadequacy, and revenge are the 4 goals. Add thrill seeking for teenagers, and you identify those by the way that you feel and respond to help them meet the need appropriately rather than inappropriately.
All right, and check back. We're going to be doing some more videos on parenting, so check back in, and we appreciate you paying attention and listening. Hope that it's helpful. Take care.